Hi everyone, my name is Caitlin Schoville and I've been teaching health and PE for the last 7 years at Pleasant Valley Junior High. I work with 7th and 8th graders. We have PE on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and health on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Health is so much fun to teach. I absolutely love every minute of it. Health affects every part of every student's lives. So the better we can make our health classes and the more engaging we can have activities, the more buy-in the students will have, and I feel like the more they will retain in the long run. So my first piece of advice to make this work, if you're going to start incorporating engaging health activities into your class and you want to have the most successful health class that you can, is one, you have to preach and practice respect, and you have to develop relationships. Without either of those, you are never going to accomplish what you want to accomplish in the health classroom. So here are the things that have worked for me. 1, health is a very, very scary class to a lot of kids, especially as a 7th grader. Think back to when you were in your health class in 7th grade or just in junior high in general and how uncomfortable you felt. So one of the best things that you can do is smile. You need to be approachable, because if you're not approachable, students aren't going to want to ask the questions they need to ask to get the information that they need to know. So for me, smiling helps with that, building that relationship and starting there. Personally, I also have to be able to joke around. My students definitely know the difference from when I'm joking around because they know I can laugh and have fun, but then they also know when I'm serious and when to take me seriously. So humor can create a bond, and it also makes you approachable. Especially with junior high kids, anything is funny. Staying calm is another piece of advice. With health, you're going to start talking about some really interesting topics, and you always have those students that are going to try to push your buttons and make you feel uncomfortable by saying things they shouldn't or just acting inappropriately, saying inappropriate things. So my best advice is to stay calm. They do say the darndest things, so if you can kind of diffuse the situation, that's great. They want a reaction out of you. The other thing, make sure you are open with your students. Talk to your students, tell them personal stories, tell them things that you've gone through. It helps them make a connection to you, make you more approachable. Let them ask questions. That's like the biggest piece of advice. I love class discussions because health, again, it affects every student differently, and they all come from different backgrounds, so you really have to make sure you are open and you encourage them to ask questions, discuss what they've brought up, talk about what they want to learn about. You also have to remind them all the time. Respect is one of my biggest things in class. I talk to them about respect almost on a weekly basis, of being respectful with what they say, how they react when students ask questions, and just reminding them constantly that you don't know what other students have gone through. You don't know what other students are dealing with at home. You don't know what other students have dealt with in the past. And it's really interesting because the students then kind of look around and realize, yeah, they really don't know what other students have gone through. So it's a great reminder for them. The last piece of advice is you have to just be you. You are not going to be able to teach like me. I'll never be able to teach like you. My very first year of teaching, I really tried to follow the path of other teachers, like, oh, these students really like this teacher, I'm going to try to be just like them. It was not my style. It did not work for me. So you really just have to find what works for you, try new things, tell your students you're trying new things, because then they're more willing to learn as well. Here's our health units. This is the order of the units that my department currently uses. These are the different activities I'm going to be talking to you about. Obviously, I have more activities that I do in certain units, but these are the main ones I wanted to talk to you guys about today. For our health standards, I've tied each of our activities to the different standards to use to assess or even just to use to plan. You should have access to all of these. I believe IAFERD is setting it up, so you'll have access to all the documents. If not, my email was on the very beginning of this presentation, and it'll be at the very end if you have any questions or want access to any of my documents. So, I'm looking forward to working with you for the next 40 minutes. Alright, so for the very first unit, we talk about decision making. Because if you think about it, everything in health relates to decision making. We want our students to make healthy choices, and in order to do that, they need to know information about each of our different health units. So the very first thing we do, it's kind of an icebreaker a little bit too, because they'll work with a partner or a small group in class, and it's called the Lost at Sea activity. We don't let them use any phones or resources. They can only talk to each other. It really breaks the ice. The students get to start talking. It's fun. One of the best things our school switched to is not allowing cell phones in the classrooms anymore. So I feel like our students actually participate a lot more. So what our goal is for them to learn is that they need to have background information in order to make good decisions. So this is how it looks. The Lost at Sea activity, basically, here's the scenario, and you guys will have access to all of this through our IAFRD presentations. If for some reason you can't get access, please feel free to message me on Twitter or email me. So basically, you and your friends get lost at sea, your boat sinks, and you are able to salvage this list of items. You have to rank them from most important to least important, and then you're going to compare it to what the U.S. Coast Guard ranks their items. So, for example, after you rank it, so if you thought a certain item was a 3, and the Coast Guard actually ranks it a 15, the difference between the two is 12. So they have to add up the differences between all of the scoring to see if they survive. So here we are. The Coast Guard's reasonings for each of their rankings really makes kids realize that they don't necessarily know what certain items are. So it's really fun to go through. Then at the end, they get to find out if they survived the challenge. And then our reflection. We allow the students some time to think about this, talk with a group member. Why did you make the choices you made? What might have helped you be more successful in this activity, and what made this activity so difficult? So again, our main point is you don't know what you don't know. So having reliable background information can help make better informed decisions. So we really like this activity. I hope you and your students could possibly use this in your classroom as well. The next thing that I follow up with the decision making is goal setting, because once students have goals set, then everything can tie back again to our decision making and making good choices when it comes to healthy living. So I have them think of just very quickly, I don't get into the whole SMART goals or anything like that, but thinking about what they want to be when they grow up. Do they have an academic goal, travel goal, family goal, and so on? But my favorite has been, what's their personal goal? So I always ask them, what type of person do you want to be known for? So if I were to go up to your math teacher and say, hey, what's Johnny like? Or your parents, or your aunt, or your coach, or your pastor, what do you want them to describe you as? How do you want people to describe you? And that really hit home for a lot of students. Then during conferences, I also pulled out each of their goal-setting sheets and showed their parents what some of their answers were, and the feedback was amazing. So many parents wanted to take pictures of it. I had a couple parents cry. It was really, really neat to see. One of the greatest skills students can learn is how to have a collaborative conversation. I'm sure you guys have all been in classes where you ask them to have a discussion about a certain topic or certain point or debate something, and the students all kind of look at each other and say, yep, I agree, and then they just stop. So in order to encourage collaborative conversations, we developed some collaborative conversation cards. When the students are in their groups, we give them the collaborative conversation cards and sometimes assign each person a role. Sometimes we just let them choose what they want to agree with. We come up with open-ended questions or prompts, and then we make sure that they're able to be argued. A lot of students will choose a side. There's lots of correct answers. One of our favorite questions to get them started is asking, what is considered a sport? That really gets the students going. So here's what our collaborative conversations look like. So if they are stating an opinion, they would choose a sentence starter from here. If they are agreeing with somebody, they can choose a sentence starter. And when you encourage the students to use a sentence starter, eventually this will become more and more natural. Another thing I really like to do, I learned this at a professional development meeting, is to assign somebody in the group to be the arguer. Right? No matter what the stance is, they're always going to challenge the other person on why they are thinking what they are thinking. They're going to ask the tough questions of why. When you assign somebody that role, then no one can get mad at each other because that is that student's particular role that they have to do. This is an activity that was high risk, high reward. We did not tell the students that we were going into our stress management unit. It was an in-between unit activity, we told them, and we actually grouped all of our health classes together in the gym. So we had 3 or 4 health classes in there at a time. We divided them up into teams, and we told them that we were just going to have a cup stacking race. Most of our students were familiar with cup stacking and had done it in the elementary schools. We told them that it was going to be their first assignment of second quarter that was in the grade book. If their team got first place, they got 10 out of 10. If their team got second place, they would earn 8 out of 10. If they got third place, 6 out of 10, and fourth place, 4 out of 10. It was just a fun activity, and we just wanted to see how it goes, and we warned them, don't worry, you'll have plenty of point opportunities later on in the quarter to help boost your grade. So, my biggest recommendation is we contacted our school counselors and we sent an email home to all parents letting them know we were telling the students we were doing this activity. There is no way we would actually put those grades in the grade book. Obviously, we were just trying to create a stressful situation for them. We never once mentioned stress, and we never mentioned that we were going into our stress management unit. So, here's what the activity looked like a little bit. Notice how loud it was getting. We encouraged them to cheer on their teammates. If you fast forward closer to the end, the kids get really into it. They're in each other's faces, which then created a great conversation. Once they thought they were getting that grade, they went home for the day, and the next time we had health class, we discussed what were they feeling. Did they handle the pressure well? Did they like the pressure? Did they like the noise? And that led right into what stress is and how everyone is different when it comes to stress. Some of our student feedback. This is one of our students' favorite activities. So it was awesome to see. Obviously, high risk, high reward. We had some kids very upset if their team did not do well and they didn't understand that it wasn't fair, and you get the drill. But if a parent didn't want their student to participate, we pulled them to the side and told that student about the activity ahead of time. All right, if you're like me, note-taking I find super boring, so I always try to mix it up a little bit. You can't overuse this strategy, though, because then the students just get goofy and they don't really pay attention. The first few times I used this, the students loved it. So, ask the experts note-taking. What you'll do, you'll divide your students into 2 separate groups. Some will be the note-takers and the others will be the experts. The students will then, depending on what your unit is or what task you are taking notes on, for example, exercise and fitness unit. The experts always list out a benefit of exercise. How is exercise going to help this person? The note takers were coming up with excuses on why people don't exercise. For bullying, the experts have coping strategies on how to deal with bullies, or if you're in a bullying situation or a friend's in a bullying situation. The note takers, they come up with and they draw signs of being bullied. Stress, anxiety, and depression. Again, the experts come up with coping strategies on how to help someone who's stressed out, anxious, or going through depression. The note takers then come up with signs. They draw a card and they have a sign. They use the T-note style of taking notes. So they have the signs of the stress that the group 1 will draw, and then they go up to an expert and they ask the expert about a coping strategy. So the dialogue might look something like this. So student A, the one who's stressed out, drew a sign or symptom called moody or irritable. They'll walk up to the expert and say, I've been really stressed lately with school, and I've been extremely moody and irritable. What should I do? The expert will then give their coping strategy. I would suggest trying to take a walk after school today and get some fresh air. Exercise and outdoors can help you relax. Student A then returns to their desk or their table, and they write down in their note guide their sign and symptom and a coping strategy. Here's some pictures of what it looks like. So step 1, the students will draw one of their signs, symptoms, or a stressor. Step 2, they walk up to the experts. The experts are all sitting on a physio ball. The experts then give the coping strategy, and then they go and record it in their notes. After 3 or 4 rounds, then we switch. The experts now become the note takers, and then we review to make sure all students get all of the notes necessary. It turned out to be a lot of fun. Another stress activity I really like to do is the balloon juggling activity, because it really shows how students have to truly physically juggle the different stressors in their lives. So we had the students in groups or individually blow up a balloon and write down a few things that stressed them out. Once that happened, we brought a student to the front, a volunteer of course, and we continued to add stressors to the mix that they had to continually try to juggle and not let any of the balloons drop. Obviously, if you have too many stressors, you're going to start dropping some things. You'll drop the ball in different areas of your life, and so the balloons give a great representation of that. Then we also had coping strategies, so they could call out a coping strategy such as writing down a list or listening to music or exercise. And as soon as they called out a coping strategy, that person assigned to that coping strategy gets to come in and help them juggle the stress in their life. So here's an example of how ours looked. Junior high kids are under a lot of stress these days, so I feel like this is a very important unit to teach them how to deal with the stress that they're under. As you can see, as we add balloons, it becomes more and more challenging. And eventually, it's just too much to handle. So when you add in coping strategies such as talking to someone or asking for help, someone can help you juggle those stressors in your life. They help you prioritize. In the bullying unit, we also use the expert note-taking. So the students draw a scenario and a sign or symptom, and then they go up to the expert and explain their scenario, sign, or symptom. And then the expert tries to give them a solution on how they could deal with that. And the student goes back and writes down their notes. Again, the students really like this type of note-taking. At the end of the unit, we have students in groups, and they create a public service announcement on bullying, on making students aware, on how to help bullies, etc. The main purpose of this, or the theme of our public service announcement, is if you're not helping, you're hurting. So this video we created, this was back when the mannequin challenge was a thing, and one of my classes really wanted to do this. So in the eyes of a victim, this is how bullying looks. One of the biggest things that kids don't realize, a lot of times they think that, well, I didn't do anything. And again, in the bully's or the victim's eyes, that's the problem, is you didn't do anything to help the victim. So if you're not helping, you're hurting. And that's our main theme when we talk about bullying. All right, online safety is huge and so important for our junior high and high school students to understand. They think they know everything about the internet, and they do know a lot. I've learned a lot about different things from my students. But we also need to teach them how to be safe. They don't realize how much information they're actually putting out there. So I tried a new activity this year, and it turned out to be one of my absolute favorites. I just found a random image online that's pretty vague, that many junior high, high school, or even parents would post and not really think twice about it. So I decided to select a sports team image. All I did was go to Google Images, and I typed in sports team, and I took one of the first pictures that popped up. I had the students in groups of 2 or 3, and I told them they were going to have 10 minutes to find out as much as they possibly could about anyone in that picture. So I'll show you the picture in a moment. The students ended up doing so good, they kept begging for more time to find more information. I said they could use their phones, they could use computers, they could use whatever they wanted to try to find information. So this is one of the pictures that popped up. Again, it's fairly vague, but you would be amazed at how much information we could find out. Some of the things we found out about some of them were exactly what day they were arriving home and where their hometown was for Christmas. Someone had found on Facebook, then they found the parent's name, they searched the parent's information on Facebook, and the mom had posted something about can't wait to pick up my daughter at the airport at 11. We have a tennis match scheduled, blah, 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 blah. And it gave the location of where they were going to have that tennis match. It was pretty insane on how much information our students were able to find. I think it really, really surprised them because at first they kind of stared at each other and they're like, how are we supposed to know anything about them? A few students even found information and pictures of like the girls' first boyfriends back when they were in junior high. Now they're in college. It was really interesting, and I think this activity really hit home with how much information they're actually putting out there. All right, time for my favorite unit, human growth and development. Most of you probably disagree and absolutely hate teaching human growth and development, but I have found that this is one of my favorite units to teach. The students are super uncomfortable, but like I talked about at the beginning of the presentation, this is one of those units you have to be very approachable. You have to stay calm when students ask certain questions. I also highly recommend creating an anonymous question box so students can drop in an anonymous question anytime. This is the first year that I actually have had 0 anonymous questions because so many students felt comfortable just asking them in class or asking me at a separate time outside of class. So 3 different things that I do during human growth and development. My kickoff is called the puberty sort. So I have all of these different changes that both males and females go through. I cut them into different pieces of paper so they can get sorted out. And they have to sort on what changes happen for a male, what changes happen for a female, and what changes happen for both. There's about 35 different changes, I believe, and the students have no background information. They're not allowed to use their phones, and they just have to try and decide together. I'll walk around and I know the exact number that should go in the male column, the female column, and the both column. So when a group thinks they're ready, I walk over and I just count and I'll say, oh, you have too many in this column, or you don't have enough in this column. And then they have to go back and kind of argue with each other and justify their reasonings. Once I feel like most groups have gotten pretty successful, we'll go over them as a group. So I start reading them off together. So for example, the first one on my sheet says grow taller. When we talk about growing taller, we talk about when males are typically done growing. We talk about when females are typically done growing. The next one, skin gets oily. We do talk about acne and pimples and oily skin and how to deal with that, how to like keep your face clean, how to avoid touching your face, just basic daily hygiene. We don't jump right into talking about penises and vaginas, otherwise the students kind of freak out. So going through the puberty sort, it really breaks the ice and the students are way more comfortable talking about the different terminology. They're comfortable asking questions. A little bit of it is sometimes humorous, and I'll bring up questions that have been asked in the past to help make students feel more comfortable as well. So again, this is one of my favorite activities, the puberty sort. My students, on their feedback survey, they had said that, this was one of their favorite activities. So you can see here the students are working at their tables trying to figure out which ones are which. They communicate with each other using the correct terminology. They debate certain changes, great conversations. This actually usually takes me about 1.5 classes to get through because we do have such great conversations. It's also a great way for them to realize that both males and females are going through changes mostly the same. Obviously, there's physical changes that males and females go through differently, but a lot of the mental and emotional changes affect both males and females. All right, this activity is listed as another one of our student favorites based on our end of the year survey on the different activities the students really like. So we have the students recreate the reproductive system in groups. So whether they're small groups or just at their table, we always assign the groups. We use this as a recall of the information from day 1 or 2 when we are talking about the anatomy and the function of the different parts of the reproductive systems. They have to communicate using the proper terms. It is collaborative work because they are not allowed to use their notes or any sort of resource. Once they've created theirs after the time limit, they walk around and they evaluate other groups, and they have to discuss what the other groups did well or had correct or what they need to change. So each group is given a set of cards. We just created with index cards little T-tents so they can set it up next to whichever piece of equipment you have out that they can use. So each group is given just a bunch of random equipment, and they can use whatever to create it however they think is proper. One of my students, she mentioned that this was her favorite activity because she was way more comfortable talking about it in human growth and development after that. All right, like I said, this is one of my favorite units. So talking about the progression of a relationship really gets students thinking about their values and their beliefs. And it's really interesting when they have to work with groups to determine the progression of a relationship. Obviously, there's no right or wrong answer. So this becomes a really fun activity because the students have to debate certain things. I also like to walk around as the students are sorting out all of their cards into the correct order. And I will challenge some of their thoughts. This has created really great conversations, really great debates. For example, when is the right time to start talking on the phone with a person? When do you share your interests with your partner? When do you trust your partner with your secrets? When do you introduce them to your friends and family? When do you talk about STDs? So it just becomes really interesting to see what the students come up with and their reasonings on why behind it. Again, this just helps open up the conversation. It builds the relationships with the student teacher, and you kind of get a better understanding of where they're coming from, and it's really neat to see them debate with their classmates on what the correct order is because everyone has different beliefs. So this year our nutrition unit looked a little bit different, although we did pull information from the same activities that we would have done in class. This year, nutrition unit fell into the online learning category due to COVID-19. So one of the things we do is analyze our school lunch menu. We give them a copy or the resource to look up what the school lunch menu is. So here's an example here at the bottom of the screen. And then they can go to our school, they can go to our school lunch menu and they can click on each item. So if they chose strawberry Pop-Tarts, it will show them the exact nutritional value of each item. They can then record the number of calories, the number of sugar, the number of protein. Maybe they clicked on the fruit punch drink, and then they have to analyze what they've eaten for the week. Another thing they do is go over restaurant menus, and they look over the keywords of different restaurant menu items and how things are described. So if it says fried, would it be healthy? What's better, fried versus grilled or sautéed, depending on how the vegetables are. So we want them to be able to point out the key words in that situation. The last one, when we start talking about fats, good fats, bad fats, we also talk about cholesterol. So we do a great demonstration, and I took a video a couple years ago and created the demonstration of how a high-fat diet affects you and your bloodstream. We have some students line up on the sides, creating a blood vessel. Then we had some put on red jerseys and use our physio balls to be the blood flowing through that blood vessel. Then we have our yellow jerseys, our LDLs, our bad fats, and how they start building up on the inside walls. And it makes it a little more challenging for the blood to get through. Then we talk about healthy choices and the HDLs, and how the HDLs can actually help remove the LDLs and remove some of the plaque from the bloodstream to help the blood start flowing a little easier. We really want to point out to students that it's never too late to make changes. So our last unit of the school year is our drugs, alcohol, and tobacco unit. Again, this past school year, we had to transition all of this to online, so a lot of these activities the students did not get to participate in this year, unfortunately. We team up with our school resource officer because obviously he has a lot of resources that we can use in the classroom. We use our resource officer to come in and be a guest speaker. He brings in some people that he knows. He also got to borrow the drunk goggles or the fatal vision goggles for students to practice with and try using just to see how alcohol, drugs can affect your vision. We obviously reiterate over and over again that your vision is not the only thing affected by this. So here's some of the activities we had the students do. They had to try to play catch with the ball. It was very entertaining for the students to watch. Obviously, they love this day because they're up out of their seats, they're moving around, they're trying to beat the system. And again, we talked to them about how, yes, your vision is impaired, but right now you're trying to counteract that by thinking, everyone is missing the line, for example, because they're walking to the left, so I'm going to intentionally try to walk to the left. The fatal vision goggles we have, they all are of different levels and abilities to show you the different blood alcohol content levels. So I believe we have 0.06, 0.10, and 0.08. So you get the idea here. The videos are really fun because then the students can watch them at the end as well. All right, another activity we do when we talk about vaping and smoking is how it affects your lungs and just your everyday life in general. So we do an activity where the students are each given a straw, and they are told this is voluntary. They do not have to do this, and obviously we reiterate safety and make sure that if they're feeling lightheaded, they stop doing the activity. But for about 60 seconds, they will do step-ups on the bleachers. They plug their nose, so they're only breathing through the straw, so it gives them a scenario of what it would be like to exercise or live with smoker's lungs. One of our teacher fails is we tried to save some money, so we cut all of the straws, and the straws ended up looking like cigarettes, so then the students just walked around pretending they were smoking cigarettes, and, well, you know how junior high kids are. Another activity we did is our tobacco experiment. We partnered up with an instructional coach who used to be a science teacher, so he came up with this idea, and we ordered wingless fruit flies, and they come and eventually they do hatch, and once they hatch, we put them into a petri dish with a little bit of chewing tobacco. The students had to come up with their hypothesis, predict what was going to happen, and then they do a 4-minute observation and record what they found. Then we discussed the results on how the tobacco affected the fruit flies, and then in turn how the tobacco might affect us as humans when it enters our system as well. This was another really exciting activity during our drugs, alcohol, and tobacco unit. In this image here, this is a unique situation where this year we had to have all 457th graders come down to the gym for the same presentation. Typically we would not do that. Normally the officers and the drug dog will come to our classes, so we'll only have 3 health classes in there at a time rather than 450 students. We also work with our local dispatchers. The dispatchers come in during our CPR unit, and they'll talk about how to call 911 and basically the process that goes with it. When the law enforcement comes in and brings the drug dog in, they talk about all the training that they do with the dog, how the dog searches for drugs. They do a demonstration of the dog searching for drugs, and this is also a dog that demonstrates if they were given the command to chase a bad guy down. They did a great presentation of if, for example, a child goes missing, on how the dog sniffs out a missing person as well. So it's a really awesome idea if you can partner up with some sort of law enforcement in your area. And then also I would highly recommend trying to bring in a group from the law enforcement to talk about drugs. They have a lot of different demonstrations that they can do and just a lot of resources. So again, getting your community involved, getting your students to hear the information from somebody else, someone who's working with this and has stories from this every single day, it really gets your students to buy in. Thank you guys so much for spending this virtual convention with me. I'm really excited about teaching health, and so if you have any questions, ideas, lessons, or thoughts that you'd like to share with me, I'm always looking for new ideas and new ways to get better as well. I would love for you to reach out. My Twitter handle is here on the screen, as well as my email. I believe IAFERD will be providing those links as well. If you have any questions about any of my stuff or want any of my resources that I've used, please let me know. Thanks and have a great day.